Welcome back to our channel. Today we will share an article written by Corbin, Dawson, and Danny. The article is Talk is Cheap. Why structural assessment changes are needed for a time of GenAI. The emergence of generative AI allows students to complete learning tasks without necessarily demonstrating genuine competence, which has considerably undermined the validity of assessments. In response to these challenges, many scholars are working to maintain the validity of educational assessment by communicating to students about how and when GenAI can and cannot be used. In this study, the authors started by examining three prevalent types of framework in current policy: traffic light-based system, assessment scales, and declarative requirements. These frameworks help guide and regulate the use of generative AI in educational settings, ensuring clarity and upholding standards in assessments and learning practice. In response to GenAI, many higher education institutions have implemented a traffic light system to manage its use in assessments. This system categorizes assignments based on the allowed level of GenAI involvement. In general, red means no AI use permitted, amber means limits assistive AI use is allowed, and green means fully integrated AI use encouraged. In response to criticism of the traffic light system, Perkins developed an artificial intelligence assessment scale. This scale originally had 5 levels, beginning with no AI use. Then the scale moved through levels allowing brainstorming, editing, and specific AI-assisted task completion, reaching full AI integration in advanced assignments. In the second version of this scale, the original 5 levels were streamlined into 4, and a new 5th level called AI Aspiration was introduced, encouraging students to use AI in a creative way. Educators need to choose the appropriate level of AI involvement for students' assessments and clearly communicate their expectation to their students. The declarative approach requires students to declare or disclose their use of AI in assessments. However, research by Gonsalves revealed that up to 74% of students did not complete the AI declaration correctly, and many were worried that admitted to AI use might be perceived negatively. We can see that there is a sliding scale of appropriateness in these frameworks, which can be identified, clarified, and communicated to students as a way of addressing the challenges of GenAI. However, there is an implied assumption that students will follow this appropriateness level. Therefore, the success of these methods is entirely based on students' compliance. The authors argued that to ensure assessments remain effective in the age of GenAI, they can be improved in 2 ways: by altering how the assessment is communicated to students, and by changing the nature, form, or mechanism of the assessment itself. The author referred to the first approach as discursive change and the second approach as structural change. Discursive change involves modifying assessment by communicating instructions, rules, or guidelines to students, allowing them to voluntarily understand and follow this directive. An example of discursive change is adding a statement like, "The use of generative AI is not permitted on this assessment" into the existing instructions. However, this approach is only feasible if reliable AI dictation technologies are available, and currently, such technologies do not exist. The authors believe that examining the assumption underlying discursive approaches reveals that they rely on 3 problematic premises. First, the discursive approach assumes that students will clearly and consistently understand what is permissible. However, the instructions about permissible AI use are ambiguous, making it easy for students to confuse terms like AI used for editing and AI used for drafting. Second, the discursive approach assumes that students will voluntarily follow the guidelines, even though there are obvious practical advantages to not complying. Third, the discursive approach assumes that educators have effective and reliable methods for verifying whether students are complying with the guidelines. Therefore, the primary weakness of discursive change lies in their enforceability. Structural change involves modifying the nature, form, or mechanism of how a task is completed, ensuring that it doesn't rely on students voluntarily complying with rules. Instead of requiring students to follow communicated AI use guidelines, structure changes create an assessment environment where desired behaviors are naturally encouraged through the assessment's design. Instead of depending on instructions, structure changes modify the assessment task itself. The aim is not to control AI use through rules, but to design assessment that remains valid regardless of any AI tool student might use while completing them. Then, it is important to think about how we design assessments. Firstly, structure changes typically involve shifting the focus of assessment from the final output to the process itself, rather than evaluating just the final results, which could be generated by AI. The assessments aim to capture the development and progression of students' understanding and skills over time. For example, instead of simply submitting a final paper, students might be required to engage in a live discussion about their evolving ideas, or showcase how their thinking was progressed through a structured peer feedback session. Second, structure changes often involves assessing validity at the unit or model level, rather than just the individual task level. Instead of ensuring that each individual assignment is AI-proof, educators can design interrelated assessment where follow-up tasks build on students' previous work. As AI continues to improve, the challenges in assessment will increase. Talking about changes isn't enough, and relying on students' compliance isn't effective. Instead, we need to redesign the assessment to highlight student abilities. This approach will enable AI to enhance education and empower learners. Thank you for listening. If you have any ideas, just comment.